Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, and welcome to ReZOO, the Zoo Review Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and I am joined on this brand new journey by my incredible co host and fellow passionate zoo lover, the one, the only, Jodi McFarlane. Say hello, Jodi.
Hello, everyone.
Presented by Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast, this sister show promises to explore, appreciate, and highlight the fantastic conservation work of zoos from around the world, while also offering a perspective of the visitor experience.
To kick off our zoo review journey, we are starting with the legendary Chester Zoo. Home to 20,000 animals, this incredible collection features everything from charismatic megafauna such as rhinos and elephants to small, unusual creatures such as onagas, hyraxes, and aye-ayes.
Today, we are going to walk you through our zoo experience, highlighting some of our favourite moments, species, and enclosures, as well as some, I have to admit, actually, very few areas where we saw room to make the zoo even better than it already is. We'll then wrap up with our 2 stars and a wish, our nice little conclusion to the show. Thank you all for joining us. Let's get started. So, to get us started, of course, I think it's probably a good idea that we talk a little bit about our experiences with Chester before we visited very, very recently. So, Jodi, what is your experience of Chester Zoo? Before we visited for this review, have you visited before when you were a kid or anything like that? What's your relationship with Chester?
I had not visited Chester Zoo before. I knew not very much at all about them. I had seen the television show that they have, Secret Life of the Zoo, I believe it's called. So I'd seen kind of bits and pieces there. And as someone who works in a zoo up in Scotland, I could appreciate it on that level. And I'd heard very, very good things from my colleagues who are obviously also big animal lovers and zoo lovers. So yes, I was very excited to go, but I really went in with an open mind because I just didn't know what to expect at all.
Yes, I was slightly different experience. I had not been in years. We used to go when I was a child. We would go down to Wales because my gran has a static caravan down there. We would go down every summer, every Easter, every time we had a holiday, we would be down there. And every so often, I would force my family to do the pilgrimage across to Chester, which was always the highlight of the holiday. And I loved it every single time. But before we went recently, I hadn't been since I was about, maybe 12-ish. So it felt like a totally new experience for me, even though I had been there previously. And yeah, it was just a really great nostalgic time. And so, yeah, it was great to reconnect with the zoo. And I'm very excited now to be talking about it again, because the whole time we were there, I just felt this overwhelming sense of kind of childlike joy, of just like nostalgia and happiness, and like, the happiness you just kind of feel in your bones, that level of that level of joy, which I have to admit, for me, that is a stretch. I never usually get that. So it was a real special moment for me. And I think the whole journey that we went on around the zoo and everything we saw kind of kicked off on a really good note. If we start right back from when we arrived, I think my first impressions of the zoo were really, really positive. When we arrived, we got parked very easily. We were there bright and early. And what we realized very quickly was that the gift shop and all of that kind of area, we could get into a coffee shop before the zoo even opened, which was a big plus. I don't know, did that kind of help your first impressions, being able to visit all of these things nice and early?
Yeah, because obviously when I'm at work up in Scotland in our zoo, I work for the visitor experience department doing various things in there. So I'm always interested in that kind of side because that's what I would be doing if I was there. So like me and you were driving in and I was sitting there going, Jack, look how big the car park is. I was so excited by the car park because it was huge. And they had like attendants wandering about the car park, and then there was like just so much going on at the entrance alone. My mind was blown already, and Jack was like, Jodi, we're not even inside, we haven't even seen any animals yet. But I just get really excited by the things that other people might find boring. I was like, look how many windows there are for buying tickets. And then we went through a gate and there was like more gates, and it was just huge. But yes, anyway, yeah, I thought it was actually really good that although the zoo didn't open till, was it 10, I think? We got there, I think, around about 9:30. And there was already staff milling about at the front. So we kind of went and spoke to them, and they directed us where to go and kind of waved us through. And you could go in and have a little look in the gift shop, which I think for us was a good shout, because we know that at the end of the day, that's when most people are going to the gift shop, and it means that you have to kind of rush at the end of the day to fit that in, and that maybe takes away from some of your zoo time. So being able to go there first thing not only kind of gets you out of the cold for half an hour instead of hanging around waiting for the zoo to open, but yeah, and it meant that you could do that at the beginning, and then it didn't waste valuable time at the end. And then being able to go in and get a coffee to kick you off on your journey was pretty good as well. So yeah, I mean, I feel like people have come here for the animal content, and I'm just raving about the entrance. But I was impressed, just because it was big and professional and slick, and yeah, really good first impression, I think.
Yes, I know we're not doing a rating system. We're not doing 10 out of 10. We're not doing anything like that. But for first impressions, that was 10 out of 10. I loved it.
Oh, and they had flags. They had flags, Jack. I was like, flags.
They
like
had flags
entering a castle. It was amazing.
And then I suppose if we shift now, as much as I loved the coffee and the gift shop and all of that, we shift now to the animals. I think the greatest benefit of the way that Chester is set up is that not only do you get a gift shop and some coffee at the start, you, of course, your first impression as you walk in is the incredible huge outdoor area for the Asian elephants. Now, I always remember being a kid and wanting to stand there for hours all day, because you would walk in and see these things that you'd never seen before, and it was just so amazing. There's something, a lot of big animals, I think, are entertaining, but they just kind of wander about and do their thing. Whereas elephants, having them first, not only are they amazing to see, they're constantly doing something. So they're all like, the little ones were playing and scrambling all over each other, and like the big ones look kind of grumpy, but they all had this great personality, great kind of, it just was such a good first impression and a great thing to see, especially kind of highlighting these endangered animals first. And it just, it was a fantastic first impression in terms of animals as well as gift experience that you could kind of view right off the bat. Excellent. I don't know, you, I think, also had a similarly similarly falling in love moment. Probably not the most eloquent way I could have said that, but you equally, I think, fell in love with the elephants when you first saw them. Did you?
Yeah, absolutely, because up in Scotland there's not that many collections that have elephants, although I have seen them in various parks. It's not something that we see very often, and I feel like certainly not on that scale, because they had so many, and then, as you say, they had babies as well. You know, there was different age groups, and I also thought that the information that they had about each of their individual elephants was really good, as well as the information that they had there about, you know, elephants in general. So that was really nice, and I thought the enclosure was pretty cool, and it had a big sort of waterfall looking thing. Yeah, and I just thought it was a really impressive first thing to walk in and see. And a point that I made at the time was that at first I was almost a little nervous, because I thought, if you're kicking off with your biggest, most impressive animal, like, surely then everything that comes after it's going to almost be a little bit of an anticlimax. But it wasn't like that. It was like, going in, you saw the elephants, that set the bar, and then that standard was met all the way through. Like, it set the tone for the rest of the day, the entire rest of the day. And I think, it was a very impressive standard that was set, and it met it continually.
Yes, especially not just in design and wow factor and everything. Also, I think, and something that we're going to mention a lot throughout the podcast, is in terms of conservation value. I think a great thing about Chester is I had to go onto their website to remind myself of some of the different projects they're involved with. I will hold my hands up, but is a lot of the animals that they had and that we saw are all part of important conservation programs. And so for the elephants, they have this program to deal with, or to try and combat, the herpes virus that is very prolific in elephants, both in the wild and in captivity. And so having something there that has this conservation message, to have this endangered species, there's this great conservation value and educational value when you first walk in as well, which I think is a really great first foot to kind of set off on the journey with. And it only kind of, as you say, continued at that level as we went on throughout our journey, throughout the zoo. Because after our elephants, we, of course, headed for big cats. As zoo people, and this is a top tip for anyone who is not a zoo person or a cat person, cats are always up first thing in the morning. If you want to see a tiger, if you want to see a lion, if you want to see a jaguar, if you want to see anything, head straight for them as soon as you arrive at the zoo, because they are always up. We know that personally from seeing Dharma and Luku, the tigers at Edinburgh Zoo, very, very often. We will always, Edinburgh Zoo is based on a hill, so we will always first thing in the morning run up a hill to see them.
Yes.
And at Chester, it was absolutely no different. We made a beeline first for the lions and then across to the jaguars. And to start the day with a couple of really incredible big cats was fantastic. When I visited previously, when I was younger, the lion enclosure was right in the center of the zoo, but they've moved it off to the side and built this whole new glossy, nice, very fancy lion enclosure, which looks fantastic, great signage, great viewpoints for the animals. It was all glass, so it felt like they were
Mm-hmm.
right there.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. They're Asiatic lions that they have at Chester, which, as we know from the multiple people we've probably talked to about the lions, at Edinburgh Zoo, they have the same type. They are critically endangered. There are very few of them left in the wild, and they are only found in one place, which is the Gir Forest in India. So to have, yes, this kind of interesting species, the lion, but with a twist almost, because I think a lot of people think African lions straight away. It's another great kind of thing to see, and the presentation of them was absolutely fantastic. I don't know, what was your impression of lions?
What was my impression of lions? Well, we got there, and I think there was two females who were just kind of sitting chilling, and then there was a male who was kind of prowling around, going up to them, trying to interact, and they were just not bothered. And I remember just appreciating that energy first thing in the morning. Um, but yeah, as you say, I mean, it's always like, and that is not in a bad way, but like when it's an animal that we're so used to seeing because we have them at Edinburgh, sometimes it's a bit like, I don't know, like it's never underwhelming, but you know, it's always just like, oh yeah, these guys, we know them. Like, yeah, nothing really new to add. It's just always nice to see them. So yeah, but I do agree. I liked that they had the enclosure, which was glass, and it made it really easy to kind of see them, but without compromising on the quality of the enclosure for the animals, if that makes sense.
Yes, it still felt like if they wanted to hide and get
Yes,
away,
yeah, that's
they
exactly what I
didn't
mean.
have to be seen. But for people like me who like photography and taking pictures of these animals, you got a fantastic, with the glass, that fantastic viewpoint and kind of perspective, that kind of, yeah, that look into their world, which was excellent. And similarly, again, with the jaguars, which we headed to next, that kind of
Mhm,
connection with them and the glass, it felt like they were right there and they could come up. And
mhm.
there was a point where I was standing looking through the glass, like, Jodi, tell me if there is a jaguar coming, and then out of nowhere this thing just appears right beside me, and it was like, oh, there they are. And I remember the building is called the Spirit of the Jaguar. I remember loving that as a child because I love jaguars. They are an unusual cat for me because they are something that I don't see very often, but they are kind of, there's something about a chunky kind of beefy cat that it was just, I love it because a lot of them are quite slender and graceful looking things, but jaguars, they look like they could really beat you up if they wanted to. I believe they actually have the strongest bite force of any big cat. So yes, they are this kind of intimidating thing, but still the enclosure and everything, you felt this kind of serene connection with them. It was fantastic. And I don't
I
know, I'm
love
gonna
that just there, as you said, chunky, beefy cat. My own cat dived off the top of the door and landed on the couch behind my head. So if anyone got that background noise, I do apologise, but she was right on cue for you there, Jack.
I love how I professionally glossed over that moment without even jumping. That was the equivalent of when the jaguar appeared next to me when I was trying to get a picture and then all of a
Yes,
sudden
exactly. It was a recreation of that moment.
yes, especially for our listeners. But yes, before I hand over to you, I again want to highlight for everyone the conservation work or the conservation message that is highlighted by Chester with the jaguars is, of course, that these animals are at risk of becoming extinct. Deforestation, habitat fragmentation. These are themes that are going to come up a lot throughout the podcast because they are
Mm.
things that affect a lot of different species, but they are really important things. They will affect species like jaguars. And so by having representatives of them at the zoo and educating people about these things in such an excellent and pristine, lovely way was fantastic. I don't know, what were your jaguar impressions? I've bigged it up a lot, but if you have any comments, they're more than
Yeah,
welcome.
no, it was really lovely actually to see the Jaguars because I don't think we have any in Scottish collections at the moment. I might be wrong there, but certainly none that I can recall. And although I have seen them in the past, I want to say at Paris Zoo. So I have seen them, but very rarely. So it was really, really nice to get to see them there. And as you say, they kind of came so up close, and I just thought the enclosure was really, really well designed for them as well. And that whole building, actually, I just loved because we went in, and before you got through to the bit where the jaguars were, there was a few different enclosures going on there. So there was the bush dogs, and then a really nice big fish tank in the middle of it, which, being former aquarium people, I feel like we always appreciate. So that was lovely. And then up above, there was like a string of what looked like cobwebs, but made out of rope, like a big tangled rope system. And I remember looking up thinking, what's going on with this? Why is this up here? And then just spotting a big fluffy bundle up on the roof, like in these ropes, and realized it was a sloth, like just hanging there. And I just lost my head. Like, I just love sloths. We just got them at Edinburgh and they got a whole new facility, so it's really exciting. And then to see them in that kind of enclosure where it just felt so open, and it was like there's just a sloth hanging up above my head. Like, I just thought it was so cool, and probably would have missed them if I hadn't known what to look out for. But yeah, I just thought, and it was kind of, at first kind of seemed like unusual animals to bring all together in one building, but I feel like it worked, and it was just, yeah, I just was really blown away with that being the first kind of indoor building that we went into. I feel like that set the tone for all the indoor buildings that were to come.
Yes, South Central America, Jodie. It all makes sense. All links up. But yes, this loss for me, I think, yeah, stood out just because as a very nervous person, looked up and went, "They're gonna fall. They're gonna." And I know, as if it was me, I would have plummeted to the ground instantly if someone went climbing along those ropes. But I should have had more faith because they looked very happy, very chilled up there. I did like the little sign. The real highlight for me was the little sign on the little island that they had next to the water that just had a subtle message that says sloths come down to poop once a week. So that's why, like, it was an interesting choice to include it. But I appreciated the highlighting of their toilet habits, because that's always the first question you get from kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice that they answered that before even anyone had to ask. And yes, I suppose moving from one tree-dwelling, charismatic, lovely species to another, we then moved across to the realm of the red ape, which again I remember loving as a child, because the red ape is, of course, the Bornean orangutan. They are critically endangered in the wild due to things such as, funnily enough, deforestation, habitat fragmentation, and also the plantations of kind of oil palm. So it's another great conservation story to message and hit home. And I think what I appreciated most about this building was not just the conservation message, but it was also the use of space was so clever, because not only did you have the orangutans, which pull people in, because the charismatic kind of, oh, we want to go and see that. When you got in there, you also had snakes and you had spiders and all sorts of other smaller species, which might not necessarily get huge crowds straight away, but because you're kind of on the pathway, you're kind of forced to go past them, forced to look at them, it brings a new light and a new kind of highlights these species that perhaps people would not spend time looking for otherwise. So that was a fantastic, I think, and very clever use of space to kind of highlight these species. I don't know, I know you felt the same with the kind of clever use of space and indoor things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really, really liked that whole building. It just felt like such a big space, but like none of it was wasted. And I think it was the first time I'd seen orangutans as well. I feel like for a zoo person, I'm really coming out with like, I'd never seen this, I'd never seen that, but just haven't really seen them much. Yeah, and I've liked that their outside space was really impressive, and then they had really big indoor areas as well. And like you say, yeah, sort of in between each window, they had these different vivs that had all the different snakes and whatnot in them. And yeah, I was just so, I mean, I quite like snakes anyway, so I feel like I'm always quite fairly easily impressed by them. But once we got round the corner and they had that tank that had the really big snakes in them, I can't remember what they were, but there was like, we counted about 5 or 6 of them, I'm sure. Beautiful, like shiny, just, and their faces were right there. And I feel like there was people scurrying behind me being like, oh my goodness, I do not want to stop here, because they were freaking out. Whereas I had my face like as close to the glass as I could get without spooking the snakes, because it was just so beautiful to see them on display like that. And I feel like a lot of places don't display things like reptiles very much because some people might not like them, but I liked that they were like, nope, we like snakes, we're putting them on display, you're gonna have to appreciate them whether you want to or not. Same with the spider. And then of course we have to mention the bonus red panda that was in there. we turned past this little bit to a new window, and there was just one little red panda there sleeping in a tree. And I love red pandas, so I was very excited. Don't really know why it was in there with no other ones, but I was like, you know what, I'm not complaining. I'll take a bonus red panda any day.
It was gingers only. That was the theme of the building. Gingers only allowed. Official sponsor Iron Brew. Um, no, it was, yes, an interesting addition. I'm sure there was a very good reason that we
Yeah,
did
there
not
would
let
have
out,
been. There
but
would have been.
yes.
It just, I feel
Um,
like if we had thought to ask, and we could have asked the volunteer that was in that building, which we should probably mention too. There was a volunteer floating around in there who was coming up to people and pointing out, where to see, like the spider and things that were a little bit harder to see, and telling people, the best spots to stand to get a good glimpse of the orangutans and things. So I feel like shout out to her because she was really bigging up all the creatures in there.
I know. We didn't catch her name, but she was fantastic because she knew the orangutan's name. She knew this. She knew that, and she was kind of taking the time to speak. Like, we didn't go to her to ask questions. She came to us to answer questions that she was like, these people will have questions. She could obviously catch our drift of being like zoo people. She came up and she knew you as soon as she saw her. You like she saw us. She knew we would have questions, and it was perfect. And I think also just before we move on from the realm of the red ape, I do think it's important to mention that I kind of threw in the palm oil fat there, but something I want to highlight actually about Chester is that they do a lot of work with palm oil, and in 2019 they succeeded in making Chester the world's first sustainable palm oil city. So they worked with restaurants across the city to ensure that all of the palm oil that was used was kind of sustainably sourced and sourced properly. And they have a great guide. I'll try and if I can find the link, I'll pop it in the description of the episode. They had a great guide a while ago that was kind of listed all the companies that use sustainable palm oil. It was just a fantastic, great list. And I will pop that in the description because it's such an easy change that you can make for conservation purposes, because obviously sustainable palm oil, or palm oil, sorry, not sustainable palm oil, they will just clear forest and plant these trees. Whereas if you source it sustainably, or if you don't source it, or if you know how to avoid it completely, you can make a big difference to a lot of different species, including, of course, linking it back in, the Bornean orangutans. So yes, that was kind of a great we're gonna have to find something to criticize because we are. This is our first one. We're gonna have to be critical about something. I'm sure we'll find maybe a small thing somewhere. It was too enjoyable. No, so yes, it was just a fantastic moment, and I think this is where my excitement was kind of peaking. The one thing I suppose at this point that the one critique I would have is that there was so many directions to go from here that we kind of got lost and
Yeah.
felt like we were getting a bit confused. And that's probably largely on us for just wanting to see everything all at once. But I would advise if you were there, especially in the kind of if you're looking at a map of Chester, up where the realm of the red ape and the penguins and flamingos, which we're about to talk about, there's a lot of paths that kind of cross over and go here and go there and everything. So just be careful at this stage if you're following the same route as us that you don't miss anything, because I feel like if you weren't paying attention, you could easily walk past something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I helpfully have a map open in another tab, which I'm just looking at right now. And as you're going around, it does have sort of A, B, C, D. It has little points, a suggested route that you can follow so that you hit all the main things. But yeah, like you say, there's just lots of little paths, and even on a path, where there might not be one of the main animals, there was still like something to see. So yeah, you could so easily like choose one path rather than another and then miss something. And I feel like we were very paranoid that we were going to miss something, so we were a little bit stressed. Had the map up many times so that we didn't miss anything. But yeah, no, that is a good point, because I remember coming out of there and we were a bit like, just there was paths going off in every direction, and we were like, oh my goodness, where do we go?
I did think it was funny that it was kind of 10-year-old Jack was charging ahead while Jodi stood behind going, where are we going? What's happening? Like,
Any
no, I
sense
remember
to
this. And turns out 10-year-old Jack's brain does not exist anymore very well. So we did have to rely on that map, which was it was fine. We made it around everything. And the next thing we found, of course, was a couple of different birds. We found the Latin American wetland aviary, and we also found the penguins, which were really interesting. Now, the Latin American wetland aviary, that's a mouthful, was closed for us because of bird flu, which is at the time of recording quite a big issue.
Yes.
So that was all closed. but we could still see the flamingos and a lot of different species through the mesh. What there was a there was a species in there which were little pink birds.
Yeah,
Which
Jack found this very funny at the time because picture this, right? We're pretty far back from the enclosure. There's a big wall of mesh in the way and lots of plants, and the birds were kind of over a little bit of water. So they were pretty far away from us. And all I could see was lots and lots of pink birds, some of which were very clearly flamingos over on the left. And then over on the right, there was other birds which were exactly the same color. And from a distance, like they kind of looked a different shape and size, but I mean, they were still bird shaped. And from a distance, I was trying to work out like what they were, and I just thought it was more flamingos. And I said to Jack, "Why are those flamingos separated from those ones?" And then he just found this very hilarious. And I'm still not quite sure what I said that was so funny, but
I mean, unless just the vision, like unless the birds, the flamingos, were about 3 miles away, they were clearly a different species of bird.
I don't know. It was early in the morning. I was so overwhelmed. I just saw the pink and thought flamingo.
So I feel like we can't, apart from that story, we can't give a fair assessment because we couldn't go fully in. But it did look like they when we went, the next day we spoke to somebody, and they were talking about how they'd just redone the aviary, and it looked like it did look very fancy and nice. We couldn't fully experience it, which is completely fair. And there were still some signs on the outside, I think, that kind of gave a little bit of information, which was good. But the birds that we could go up and see were the penguins, of course. Now, I believe we are slightly biased because Edinburgh Zoo, which we both work at, has one. It's the largest.
I think it's the largest penguin enclosure in Europe. Yeah.
Yes. So we have a lot of penguin. We are harsh penguin critics.
Yeah.
So we have to be. We'll try and be fair here, but yes, I think the penguin space that they did have was was not very small, but it was smaller than what we were used to, but still I think very good. Lots of glass to see them kind of under the water and a raised platform to see them from above. So I still very much enjoyed it. What were your thoughts on the penguins?
Yeah, that was one of the only bits I think that I was perhaps slightly underwhelmed. But then even then, it pains me to say that because I'm like, no, I just loved everything, and everything was still so impressive. Like it wasn't anything to fault Chester on. As you say, it's just that we are so used to such a big penguin area that by comparison it perhaps felt a little bit smaller, and I think they only had one type of penguin whereas we've got three. So not that I like point scoring, not at all. Like I still think penguins are lovely, and I did really like the closure that they had. Yeah, the only thing was when we went, I think there was like one swimming about in the water, but then all the other ones were up on the little land bit, which was kind of far away from where we were. So I just feel like we weren't too close to them. But no, I didn't. I don't want to say that I had an issue with it because I didn't. I still loved it.
Anyone listening who works at Chester or who represents Chester, we are nitpicking because there is so few things that we were like, this isn't great. Everything was perfect. So we have to be. It's like, I don't know if you watch Four in a Bed. It's like when they start turning mattresses over on. If you're not.
We just have to find something wrong.
Yes.
One tiny crack, but we will find it.
Yes, if you're not from the UK, Four in a Bed is a hilarious show where 4 B&B owners go and basically rate each other's bed and breakfast experiences, and they're all crazy, and they're like finding lighting, they're like turning over lighting fixtures, like ripping up toilets, carpets, just trying to find something wrong. And this is what we're doing for Chester Zoo.
They're like running their finger along the top of the curtain pole to find like a speck of dust. That's what we're doing here with the penguins. It's a speck. That's all it is.
Yeah. It was. I don't even think it would move it down a full point if we were judging.
No, not at all.
What would move it down a full point? And this is nothing against Chester. It is against the otters, because I really wanted to see a giant otter, and they disappeared. And they were right next to the penguins, and I all day I wanted to. We kept nipping back to see them, and they were just chilling. And I mean, can't hold it too much against them, but I would have liked to see a giant otter, and sadly we did not. So if you do want to see them, make sure you have plenty of time allocated to nip backwards and forwards to see if they're there.
Yeah, because I've seen otters before, but I don't think I've actually seen giant otters. Again, another thing that I hadn't seen. So I was hoping to see them, but yeah, because we went back, I feel like a good number of times over the sort of 2 days that we were there, and we just never spotted them. But then I know from Edinburgh, the otters that we have up there often only come out sort of in the afternoon, or that's when they're more active. So, it'll be maybe spotting the otters is sort of, you need that inside knowledge of working there to know when you're most likely to see them. So yeah, we can't hold that against Chester. That was just the otters not wanting to come out. Which is fair. We're not going to be those people who are like, they wouldn't come out.
Banging on the glass. That's a top zoo tip. If you don't want to make enemies of everyone who works in a zoo, never bang on glass, because we will hate you forever.
And also, if you somehow think that banging on the glass will make the animal more likely to engage with you, you are wrong. So maybe just don't do that.
Yes, please refrain from glass banging. I've just looked at my next note. What a transition, because we go from glass
I don't know what's coming next, but how is glass banging a transition to anything?
The lovely aquarium. The lovely aquarium.
Of course, the aquarium.
Yes. Because every time I go to an aquarium, all I can think of is Darla from Finding Nemo, where Mr. Fishy. Yes, that is where we were heading with that one. And I think to have an aquarium in a zoo is something that not many zoos have. They occasionally have fish tanks with a couple of things, maybe a coral reef tank and maybe something interesting here and there. But to have a whole dedicated aquarium building, which I thought was a really nice touch. The only place that I have to compare it to in my mind where they had a full aquarium was Amsterdam Zoo. And Amsterdam Zoo's aquarium, I remember being absolutely fantastic, having all sorts of different rays and sharks and all sorts of things. And I remember that being kind of top tier of aquariums. I haven't been in years, but that's kind of the stick in my mind moment of kind of a zoo aquarium. And so when we went into this, I was kind of nervous because I know it's smaller and have less kind of diverse species, but I thought the species they did have were really interesting, really good. They had a mix of kind of charismatic, interesting, the standard things you'd expect to see, like clownfish. And then they also had things like the upside down jellyfish and all sorts of things. So it was a good mix of the kind of things you'd see regularly and unusual things. And I don't know, what were your thoughts on the aquarium?
Yeah, this was one of my only points where I felt like I wanted more from this. And Jack's just made a real shocked face, because I know that is a big statement about Chester. Yeah, but then also I have to say that I'm very biased, because having worked in an aquarium, I feel like, well, you two, like, we are aquarium people. So yes, like, my expectations are always very high. And yeah, like, as you say, I feel like the little aquarium that they had there was very nice. I just wanted more. But that's just because I always want more aquarium, because I love aquariums. But then on the other hand, I acknowledge that obviously we know from the local knowledge that they have another large aquarium not far from Chester Zoo that is kind of the main aquarium in that area. So it wouldn't make sense for the zoo to have a big aquarium, in itself, because the main one's kind of just round the corner. So with that in mind, as you say, yeah, it's nice that they included anything at all. And I think one of the first things you saw when you went in, there was like a coral tank, and I always appreciate a coral tank. They're very hard to keep. So I thought that was nice. And this is also a random point, but something that I liked about the aquarium, because I feel like the building was kind of tucked away a little bit and you might struggle to find it, but on approach to the building, there was a little like fish painted on the ground. And so if you followed the little trail of fish swimming, you found the aquarium, which I just thought was a really cute little touch.
And I thought it shows our mindset in that I, like a child, saw a painted fish and went, ooh, let's follow those. Where are we going?
Yeah, follow the fish.
Yes. And yeah, the aquarium, of course, that Jodi is referring to is the Blue Planet, right round the corner. Well, we didn't go, so I don't know how far away it is. But
we passed many signs for it on the way.
Many signs, yes. So it is, yes. And I remember it was nice. Is it banded cardinals that they had? They're the ones that you had one in your fish tank. Was it a Bangor cardinal, I want to say? Yes.
I can't remember. I was so overwhelmed by the fish tank. And then they had seahorses, and I love seahorses. I think that was the point where I smacked my hand off the glass by accident trying to point to something, because the glass was so clean I didn't realize it was there. So there's a star for the aquarium. It was well clean.
Yes, and actually a star for the whole of Chester Zoo. A brief mention to the cleanliness of the whole place. I think we saw
not only the glass of the enclosures and whatnot, but just like in terms of litter and all that kind of thing. Actually, I hadn't really thought of that before now, but yeah, it was like sparkling.
I remember you saying when we were leaving and getting in the car, and kind of it was like the only thing you noticed was a face mask that had been dropped, and that the only reason you clocked it was because everything else was so spotless that it was
Hmm.
like, oh, it stood out because everything else was perfectly clean. And
Yeah.
we did go in November, so maybe it's a bit quieter than during the summer months, so maybe easier to clean. But to have it at that standard was fantastic, and it just built on the experience because it was like sometimes you walk around places and you kind of think, oh, there's clearly been a descent of picnickers and all of
Hmm.
these things, and there's just rubbish everywhere, but there was nothing, and it was fantastic. So shout out to whoever cleans Chester Zoo because you're doing a fantastic job. Now, I don't have as good of a transition this time. I've not set myself up well, but
Oh dear.
um, after
Disappointed.
I know. But after the aquarium, we went across to the chimps. And now I'm a fan of chimps. It was exactly how I remembered it from when I was younger. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'll let you make up your mind. I still loved it. And I think it was really great because not only do they have the chimps at Chester as kind of ambassadors of the species, they actually are. Chester Zoo is actually working with the Nigerian National Park Service to conserve chimpanzee habitats. So something else to highlight as a really positive plus there, because I think chimpanzees are a very popular species. You see them in a lot of zoos, but it's nice that they go beyond just kind of having them there as representatives. They back that up with actual real world actions out in the wild as well, which I really appreciate. I don't know. The standout for me was, of course, the little one, who was
Yeah.
swinging around, banging on the glass, looking for attention, wanting to have his photo taken. He was just fantastic and very, very cute and very amusing. And I think winding everybody else up because he saw groups of, I think it was a scout group or something come in, and it was like, it is showtime. It's on. Now it's my time to shine. Um, and so, yes, that was fantastic for me to see a critically endangered species kept in such a nice, positive way. Also educational and cute. Always a good combo. What about yourself, Jodie?
Yeah. Now, I'm going to make a bold statement here. And I don't know if I should make this statement as a zoo person. And now, especially given that it's going to be on record for anyone to hear and reference back to.
Hmm.
But confession time. I am not a fan of chimps. Right. I know. I feel like it's the one animal that I can honestly say I just don't know if I like. And it's not like I appreciate that they're intelligent and they're amazing and whatnot, but they just freak me out, right? It's just it's all just a little bit too Planet of the Apes for me. It's something about them just unsettles me. However, the reason I'm saying this is because it turns into a bonus for Chester. Given how much I really don't love chimps much, it therefore takes a lot for me to feel positively towards them. But that little one that you just mentioned who was like swinging around, it was probably the first time I've been like, oh, at a chimp, right? And I feel like, yeah, as you said, like he was swinging around. It's like if you've seen The Greatest Showman, you know, when like Zendaya's doing her, she's like swinging around on that rope, just living her best life with her hair blowing. Like that was that little one. It was having a grand time. So yeah, I feel like it was one of the first instances where I've seen a chimp and actually been like, do you know what? Maybe they're not so bad. So there, coming from that sounds like a negative, but actually coming from me in terms of chimps, it's actually a very big positive.
I think so. I think I'm going to consider that a win.
Yeah.
And for everything we talk about in the future, we do plan on doing more of these. So every zoo we talk about in the future that holds chimps will be held to this account, this level,
Hmm.
this standard of making Jodie fall in love and not being scary. But to be fair, actually, there is times where you hear them going for each other or they're just shrieking, and it freaks me out as well because it's like if that animal was to get out, it would
Yeah.
because they just are kind of. I shouldn't say that because they're probably very gentle and very friendly, but just the kind of sheer strength is intimidating and it makes me nervous. So yeah, um, I can see where you're coming from. I don't agree, but I can see where you're coming from. Now once we left the chimps, we came to my favorite part, a memory that will stick with me till the day I die, which was nothing to do necessarily immediately with the animals. Actually, it's totally to do with the animals, but it's a combination of things. It's the fact we were standing next to a map, and as Jodie previously mentioned, they have very helpful markers A, B, C, D throughout the park to say you can follow these, and they will take you on a route. So we're standing in between some lovely Congo buffalo and giraffe. And I'm looking at the map on my phone, and it's a very peaceful, just taking a moment of rest. And Jodie looks at the map that's on the wall, and she goes, "Oh, Jack, we're in the P zone." Now, as Jodie says, we're in the P zone. It is like she has triggered a urine tract explosion. There is pee coming out of buffalo. There is pee coming out of giraffes. There is pee coming out of everywhere, and it was the
What I
most.
love most about this moment as well is that I was completely oblivious to all of this going on behind me. You were dying behind me, like watching all of this happening in fits of laughter, and I was too busy staring at the map, like figuring out that we were in the P zone.
we
And I
were
turned around and chaos was just raining. It was insane.
we were firmly planted in the P zone because it's like the buffalo are fairly low level, so it was just a gentle stream. But the giraffes, it was really a waterfall of just water, and it just, I don't know why I found it so amusing, and it's very potty humor, quite literally, but it really stuck in my brain, and I will never forget that moment because it was so funny. And if I ever visit Chester again and enter the P zone, I am expecting nothing less from
I
those
know, it's
fantastic.
timing that we just couldn't have made up. I feel like that was round about the same area as well. There was something, was it one of the buffalo? Like, it was just, you turned round and it was randomly like licking a wall, but like not gently. It had its whole face smooshed against the wall, like tongue out, just like licking all the moss off of it. And I was like, this has turned into a very strange afternoon.
I
Like,
loved it. I loved it because those buffalo, I think, are, and it's a strange thing to say, but they were a strangely beautiful buffalo. They were this nice kind of dark mahogany color. They were very pretty buffalo. And also, of course, we had the giraffe to appreciate behind us. And
mhm.
of course, something slightly unusual were the Okapi. Now, I'd seen Okapi previously in the year at London Zoo when I visited there earlier this year. We'll have to do a review of London Zoo at some point because it was very, very fun as well. But yes, when I visited London Zoo, and then when I visited Chester, I was reminded of just how fantastic and wonderful Okapi are. For anyone who doesn't know, the Okapi is a relatively new species. It was only quote unquote discovered in 1901, at which time the British Museum thought that they were looking at a new species of zebra because it has these kind of striped legs, brown torso, but ultimately, yeah, kind of the stripes make it look quite zebra-esque. But in fact, they're more closely related to giraffe, and they're fantastic. They're only found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're endangered, so it's an important representation to have them there. And I know in the past, Chester successfully bred the Okapi, and yeah, it's just fantastic moment for me because I've always loved them. I remember them from when I was younger, kind of seeing these incredible, incredible creatures, and they are equally inspiring to this day, if not strange. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think they had as much of an impact on you, but I certainly loved them. So,
Yeah, I think by that point, like with all the chaos that was going on around us, with like the buffalo licking the wall and the pee flying everywhere, and I was just trying to get us to the giraffes, and all this was happening, I was like, okay, Jack, come on, we need to move.
That's fair. That is fair. And speaking of the giraffes, I suppose we should mention them. We got some very nice photos with the giraffes. They are clearly very, very friendly.
So
Uh,
many as well. Like they were all, I think, inside as we approached, and we were lucky that just as soon as we were walking towards them, before all that chaos started raining, they all slowly started coming
Poor
out.
word choice. Started raining.
Thankfully, not raining on us. But yeah, they all came out, and it was like after maybe 3 had come out, I was like, oh wow! But then they just kept coming, and I was like, surely there can't be many more, and they just kept piling out, and it was just like, wow.
It was a clown car of giraffes, and it was
Yes,
fantastic.
yeah. So how could they all fit in there? But yeah, they just kept on coming.
And then, of course, yes, you go into the giraffe house, and there was still some hanging around in there, even though
Yeah.
hundreds had poured out. You then kind of go through the Okapi house, and they have, again, like in the realm of the Red Ape, they have the kind of highlighting smaller species.
Yeah.
I believe there was Dik-Dik. Love a Dik-Dik. Always a highlight for me. Please do not clip that audio. Fantastic, wonderful species. And yeah, just nice to see them alongside another one of my favorites, of course, the Okapi. And yes, claps to Chester Zoo for having two fantastic. Well, I suppose giraffes are also, and the Congo buffalo. This is the problem. Everything is such a highlight. I keep being like, congratulations, Chester, for doing this so well because you put all of my favorites together. But if I started expanding that, it would be the whole zoo. So we'll have to just dial it back slightly. But once you get through that space, and have successfully not been peed on, you then arrive at there are Red River hogs. Just a brief mention because I do think of all of the hogs, they are one of the most beautiful. And then you enter the tropical realm, which features one of my favorite animals inexplicably, which is a Victoria crowned pigeon. Now, I don't know why I love it. Well, actually, I do know why I love a Victoria crowned pigeon because they are camp. If they went to the
Yeah,
Camp Met Gala, they would have won the Camp Met Gala. They
it's
are
like a regular pigeon in
fantastic.
drag.
It's fantastic. They are just. I actually unintentionally on the first day at Chester went dressed in the colours of a Victoria Crown pigeon. That is how much I love them. They are these bright blue with kind of feathers on the crest of their kind of head. They have these, it's bright kind of red eyes. They're just like these fantastic, beautiful things. And they're so confident that they're kind of one of those animals that like, oh, you're smaller than me. If I walk towards you, it'll kind of move out the way. It'll be fine. But they don't move. They are there to fight and win. And
Oh
I
yeah, you're
love
in
them
their
so much.
space. Like they're just
Yep.
letting you know.
Yep. And I think just to mention the tropical realm, it's an indoor building. It's a kind of bigger space. They have the Victoria Crown pigeons, of course, but then they also have radiated tortoise, which are critically endangered. So great. If you want to hear more about them, listen to The Land of the Lemurs, our last series, because fantastic. It's just such a fantastic space. It's got the tortoises, hornbills, all sorts of different birds, reptiles, and then you walk through and you see the eye as well. So just a very interesting kind of nice collection. And I think especially in November, it was nice to go inside where it was nice and warm and have all these species flying around you. I don't know, what was your impression of this kind of space?
Yeah, I liked it. I like birds. So I always like a birdhouse. I feel like if you're someone who is scared of birds, then this is not for you. Because there were many, many birds. And like, I mean, I've been in a lot of birdhouses at various zoos, and there's normally like, you know, a fair number of birds. I like you went in here, and I mean they were everywhere. Like there were so many, more than I thought would be possible to have in a birdhouse. But like it was fantastic because they were just. And what was nice was that, like you said about the pigeons, it really felt like you were in their space. Like they weren't scared of you. They weren't going to move for you. Like, so you really had to be sort of respecting them and their space, which I feel like everybody did when we were in there. And yeah, it was just really nice to see so many free flying. And then they had some that were in enclosures as well. And at one point, like along the kind of far wall, they had, I think, hornbills. And it reminded me of, you know, like Russian dolls where it's all an identical doll, but they're just kind of getting bigger as it goes up the line. But like at one point we were wandering from enclosure to enclosure, and with each one it looked like an identical bird, just slightly bigger than the last one, until we got to a massive one at the end. So I appreciated that. Yeah, and then once you got through to where the eyes were, I really liked that because another thing I had never seen. And obviously it was really dark, what with them being nocturnal and things, and you had to go in and be very quiet. And I just thought it was a really nice touch, and they'd thought of a really sort of clever, nice way to adapt that sort of enclosure so that visitors would still get to see them. And I just thought it was quite cleverly done.
Yeah, with the red light to kind of allow you to witness, but it was still dark and it was still peaceful and it was still, yeah, fantastic. And
yeah, like the way that they'd set that up meant that we could see those animals that otherwise we wouldn't normally get to see, but without compromising on anything for them, which I thought was good.
Yes, excellent. Very nice way of putting that. I'm a big fan. Yes, and yeah, I think there's something about eyes that when you see them, they are kind of strange looking. In pictures, they always look like something has just kind of shocked them. They look horrified by it. And in person, they do still kind of look quite shocking. But to see them in motion is always nice and interesting. And yeah, really stood out to me as well, I think. What also stood out to me, excellent transition, it's almost as if we planned our route on purpose, was we then walked to their area, which is kind of themed almost around Madagascar, to see their different species of lemur and fossa. And what really stood out for me, I think, were the sifakas, which if you've not listened to The Land of the Lemurs, I really recommend going back and listen to those episodes, especially the ones about sifakas, because Susie Lewis told me, here's an interesting fact. Do you know how sifakas got their name?
Oh, you told me this when we were wandering through Chester, but now I can't remember. Remind me.
So sifakas got their name because as they make a noise where they kind of go sifaka and kind of click like that. So that's how they got their name. Thank you, Susie Lewis, for that. That was I'm breaking that out every time I see them. So yes,
But it was the first time I'd seen them, and I have to say, I mean, I like lemurs in general. I've been lucky enough to feed lemurs in the past, and I think they're just so wonderful and charismatic and cute and just lovely. But the sifakas especially were so cute. Like, as lemurs go, one of the cutest, got to be. They were just so fluffy. And I know that we appreciate all the animals and the underappreciated ones and not just the ones that are cute, but I have to take a moment to just say they were so cute.
And there's no surprise that they are the only sifakas you've ever seen, because they are, in fact, the only sifakas in the UK. They were the first ever to arrive in Europe. They are famously known for dancing. They came from, I believe it was the Duke Lemur Centre, to try and set up a European breeding program for the species. So fantastic. That will be why. I like how I don't have that note written down. It's like I came up with that off the top of my head, but in fact I had it written down because I was like, I'm going to make sure and mention this because it's really interesting. They also had, of course, red ruff lemurs. If you don't know why I am terrified by red ruff lemurs, you must listen to Learning to Love Lemurs, because I tell the story of when I had an encounter with one in the past, but still nice to see them. And then, yes, this was kind of one of the walkthrough areas of the zoo. You could walk through an enclosure and see them. And yes, there was a person there, very friendly, working, trying to getting people through. I think there was one on the outside, and there was also someone inside answering questions. Which
there
was,
was, yeah. I think, if I remember correctly, the person outside, because that was a walkthrough, it was one of the areas where they really had to enforce the mask wearing for the safety of the lemurs. So she was out there, I think, just making sure everyone was complying with that. And then the person inside almost looked to me like he was on doing some kind of tour or some sort of educational thing, but he might have just been in there to answer anybody's questions. But we kind of eavesdropped on what he was saying as we went by, and sounded like he was giving a good chat.
Yeah, it was good. And again, yes, a fantastic space. You then got through the kind of walkthrough and arrived at the Fossa, which I always think it makes sense to group things by country. And it's one of my pet peeves when zoos don't group things by country. I like to have things next to other things that they belong next to. But it always seems cruel to group Fossa next to lemurs, because they're probably looking through the glass and thinking lunchtime, and those poor lemurs are probably looking through the glass and thinking run. But yeah, it was great to see such kind of a cohesive point where everything was kind of put together. The one thing I would say is we had a little trouble finding the lemurs just because of the way everything was kind of laid out. We kind of ended up at Mongoose, which
like we thought we were going the
unintentionally-
right way, and then we turned a corner and there was like the mongoose thing, which seemed like a cool little enclosure. Like it had a little one of those sort of glass bubble things that you can crawl into and put your head up into to get a good view. We didn't because of COVID, but that seemed like a cool thing. Yeah, but it just felt like we thought we were heading to lemurs, and then we walked around a corner and stumbled upon the mongoose enclosure and a random family having a picnic on a bench, and it was just we were a little bit lost, but you know what, we got there in the end.
I think what we're in fact learning is not that Chester Zoo had anything wrong, but that we just can't read a map.
Yeah.
But we tried our very, very best, and I think we did quite well. Now, once we had found Madagascar, gone through Madagascar, I believe we took a brief lunch break at this point, and then we returned to look at the Komodo dragons. Now, the Komodo dragons are fascinating. They're the world's biggest lizard. They can get to be about 3 meters long. I remember this from when I was younger, and it kind of was re-highlighted again when we visit. Chester Zoo do work to try and protect the dragons in their habitat and try and kind of prevent human-wildlife conflict. They're trying to kind of get a survey, I believe, of all of the Komodo dragons in their native habitat. The issue there is, of course, that unlike deforestation, where it's not deforestation and habitat fragmentation all of the time, this one is human-wildlife conflict, which they kind of go for livestock and things, which creates conflict. And so it's important to know where they are, what they are. And Chester Zoo is trying to help raise awareness of that and help fund and run, I guess, a full-scale survey of Komodo dragons in, I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of this place, Flores. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of work that they're doing. Now, when we got there, the first time, the Komodo dragon had his head in the hole and clearly did not want to be bothered. So we quickly walked past. But the second time, he was up saying hello, which was very nice and looking very, very confident and handsome. But then within the same building, I don't know if you have anything to say about the Komodo dragon, Jodi, but what I do know you will have something to say about, and to explain to the listeners, is your confusion around what was a mountain chicken.
Yes. So after we'd seen the dragon, we went through to another sort of room or section, which had, I have to say, a pretty hefty enclosure. It was big. It was sort of, there was a lot in it. You know, it was a nicely decked out enclosure, and a sign talking about these chickens. So I'm like, oh, must be some kind of bird that we're looking for. We're looking everywhere thinking, how small must they be if we can't see them? And there was no picture to offer a reference for what we were looking for. And then one of us, I can't remember if it was me or you, eventually spotted the living creature that was in that large enclosure. And it turned out it was not, in fact, a chicken or even any kind of bird. It was some sort of frog or toad thing. And I was baffled. That was a real surprise for me because I genuinely thought we were looking for a chicken.
Mm-hmm. It was a real standout moment for you, somewhat unexpectedly, just caught you
Yeah.
off guard.
Yeah, it did. But you know what? Love it. Keeping me on my toes. The one other thing I would say about that building, what was that building called? Can you remember?
I think it was Dragons in Danger. Dragons, something like along those lines.
Was it? Oh, I thought with that building, it was called something quite sort of vague. And so we didn't know what was in it until we'd gone in. And then the Komodo dragon was in there. And it's like, oh, well, we might have missed that because we didn't realize that's what was in there. Because I thought, I couldn't remember what it was called, but I didn't think it was anything obvious. I thought it was vague.
I think this was midpoint of me dragging you around, going, "We're going this way."
You just got so lost. I know, and you're right. And also, you glossed over the lunch break, but I just want to jump in here and say, because I appreciate the whole zoo, not just the animals. I was very impressed with like the selection of food and lunch options that they had on offer, especially given we went in November, because normally they would a lot of those outlets would shut down and there wouldn't be a lot of choice in the winter. But I felt like everything was still, there was little snack cuts along the way that obviously would be closed in the winter and only open in the summer. But I felt like their whole sort of food operation was still running pretty well for the middle of the winter, and I thought there was a lot of choice.
Because we actually went to the light show the night before we went to the zoo properly, and all of these stalls were open, and I assumed, yes, they were just open to serve kind of dinner to people who were going to the lights.
Yeah.
But it was actually nice to kind of have the options of pizzas and all sorts of other things during the day as well. So, yes, that was excellent. Hello everyone, just a quick note to say that because we talked for so long, we are splitting this episode in two. We really hope you've enjoyed hearing this first part all about the realm of the Red Ape and the Jaguars and all sorts of other stuff, but because we talked for 2 hours, we decided to break this up, give you a little bit of a time to process everything that we'd said so far, and yeah, next week you'll hear about all our experiences in the other half of the zoo, things like the islands area, we've got the rhinos, we've got all sorts of stuff coming up that's really, really exciting, really fun, and kind of our concluding thoughts as well, which is obviously the most important part of our review. So yes, I should say, I would like to say we planned this to be a grand, spectacular 2-parter for the first ever ReZOO, but in fact, it is just me and Jodi wouldn't shut up. As you can see, we're very passionate about this. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to what we've said so far, and I hope you'll tune back in next week to hear even more. If you would like to hear even more, of course, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your streaming service of choice. We're at Pangolin Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook, just search Pangolin, the Conservation Podcast. And we are on LinkedIn, just search the same thing there. Follow us, like us, subscribe, all sorts of stuff. We would be very, very grateful. On those platforms, we have received such amazing love and light and support and everything from all of you about this idea. And it just means the absolute world. And thank you so much from the bottom of both mine and Jodi's hearts for that. It means the absolute world. But yes, I suppose I should go. We've already taken an hour of your time. And so thank you so much for listening. I really hope you'll tune back in next time for part 2 of our ReZOO. And yes, for now, I guess it's just time to say one last massive thank you and bye-bye.